Welcome back to the last chapter of our title in Mastering Flux, and we have a lot to cover. In this chapter, we'll be building out our tasks. It's a little bit longer than previous chapters. In it, we're going to be making our actions asynchronous so we could then approach our server using body parser and express, have our server save the data into a database, technically speaking, into Mongo using a Mongoose schema, and then we'll save that task into Mongo, pushing it back all the way to the client, making sure that we could get all those existing tasks that already exist as well. Last but not least, we'll also remove a task, going through the full flow again. So let's jump right into the first lecture, which is making our actions asynchronous. And what I mean by that is that so far, our actions were deeply tied to our store in many ways, because as soon as an action happened, we dispatched a call, and then the store made the change. But in reality, what we really want to happen is an Ajax call to happen in between our action and the time that our store actually gets it. And we're going to take a look at how do we do that in this lecture. Alright, welcome to the last chapter, and let's connect everything together to connect it to a server to make this a real-world type of application, where you're still going to need to work on building out all these different features for your task, but you're going to have the foundation, which is really what this course is all about. Okay, so let's get started. So first of all, what I'm going to do is, and I'm going to go into my actions and just to explain first what I'm planning to do. The one thing that I want to do is I want to actually create that change now that we already know how to work with Flux. So first of all, I'm going to go ahead and change this task from addTask to addTask sync. And really the word sync comes from Node, which basically translates in our scenario to just do it immediately. Kind of like in a way, change immediately into our application, change immediately the store. But in reality, we want our addTask to do something else. We want it to actually approach our server. So whenever we're going to get this packet, what do we want to do when the packet is received? Well, there's a few things that we want to do. First of all, we want to do an Ajax call. Now, technically, right now, we don't have Ajax. Well, we want to add that Ajax support, and there's a lot of different Ajax libraries out there. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use one of them, and I'm just going to type here npm install. Oh, and if already I am talking about this, you know what, let's go ahead and make a small change. So in our package, pack.json, notice that we have here and I'm just talking now about the dependencies versus the dev dependencies. If we were planning for our application, our React application, to render on the server as well, it would make sense for it to be a dependency. But in reality, what's actually going on, Webpack is packaging all the things that are needed and sending it in as an external file. As such, our server never really needs access to React or React DOM, or for that matter, to Flux. So let's just go ahead and just grab those items, and I'm just going to go ahead and remove them out. And obviously, if in a scenario that you decide that you want to do some server-side rendering, then you would need it to be a dependency. Okay. So let me just put that right there. So literally, I'm moving my dependency, telling npm, telling Node that this is only going to be used when we're instantiating. This is only going to use as development. It's not going to be used in a production environment, because Webpack is already going to package all that stuff just as much as it packaged all of the Babel things. So with that said, now that we saved that, let's go and install our Json library, and in my case, again, I'm going to save it into dev, because technically right now I'm only going to be using it for dev. Now, generally speaking, you always want to save it to the least, start from dev, and then if you need it for the full app, then just move it into the full app. So let's go ahead here and let's save it, let's install it, and while the installation is taking place, let's go ahead and start building out the logic flow. So first of all, I could just go ahead and write in my task, start working with it, but instead I want to create a utility. And the reason why I want to create a utility is to simplify simple Ajax a little bit further for any situation where we might want to call multiple times different types of actions. So let's go ahead and I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it what's that? No, I don't want to delete. Oopsie. New folder, and I want to call it utils, which is going to be one of our utilities. And let me find, where is utils? Oh, hello, that took you a while. New file, and I'm just gonna call this Ajax. And alrighty, so let's go ahead and create our Ajax file. So what is our Ajax file going to store within? So first of all, we're going to import Ajax, the library, and I'm going to import it from simple Ajax. The next thing that I'm going to need to do is actually create the external function. So I'm going to export a default singular function, which is basically going to be in charge of doing the Ajax call. Alright, so let me go ahead and I'm going to send your object that's going to go inside of here and deconstruct this object as it's coming in. So first of all, we need a URL, and I'm going to set the URL to default to basically nothing if nothing was there, so it's going to be an empty string. The method will be the type, which could be post, it could be get, but I'm going to set the default to be post because that is what I'm using most commonly, and in this situation, the only thing I'm using. Next is also I'm going to send that data source, which is going to be that packet, and I'm going to set a default to it as well, so even if I didn't send anything, it will be an empty object. And I'm going to put here another hook or a callback. I like calling them hooks. So I'm going to have your fail hook. I'm going to have your success hook. And last but not least, I am going to, well, no, I don't even need the rest. So those are the properties that I really want to listen into. Those are the things that we're going to be sending into this function. All right, so let's go ahead and I'm just going to create a constant, and I'm just going to call it AJ for Ajax. And I'm going to call a new Ajax, and I'm going to send into that new Ajax these new structures that we've just created. So first of all, and by the way, first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go ahead here, and I'm just going to send inside of here. First of all, I'm going to send in the URL. I'm going to send in the method. I'm going to send in our data as well, but for our data we're going to make a little bit of a modification. For our data we're going to ask from JSON to string fi our data. All right, so we're making sure that our data is going to be sent in as a string. Beautiful. Let's go ahead and continue. So now in our AJ, what do we want to do? There's a few listeners that we need to listen into. So on success, we want to do one thing. So it's going to send in an event. And let me just copy paste this because we have 3 of them that we want to basically listen in onto. So that's 1, that's 2, that's 3. So we have your success, we have your error, and we have complete. Now, technically speaking, for our fail hook, that's really our on error. So in that scenario, we might want to do something more specific. So for example, here I might do here if we have a fail hook. So I could do here if fail hook end fail hook open and close. So basically what I'm doing here, this is instead of if else, which I love doing this, which basically just checks if it's there. If the value is actually a value, it's not false, it's an object, it's something, in this case it's a function, then I'll move on to the next one because it's an end, and here I'm going to just go ahead and I'm going to call that fail hook, and I'm going to extract out of our event the target dot response. All right, so we're going to get the full response. We're going to get what was inside of that error sent to our failback method. So it's going to get the actual response. We don't need everything else that's connected to it. On complete, we also want to do something. So on complete, we're going to go ahead and let's also just set this for our on success. So for our on success, I'm just going to keep this simple, keep this clean. So for our on success, I'm not going to call this on success. I'm only going to call on complete. And I could have made that separation, but in my case, I just want to know when everything is done. So if everything is done, I'm just going to, for success, I'm just literally leaving here nothing for now. But I'm going to go ahead for our on complete, basically ask if we are listening to it. And what are we going to do when we're going to call it? We're going to go ahead and we're going to do a JSON parse for the data itself that came through. And I'm going to ask from that parse e.target.response. Okay, so all I did here is that just walking through this new object that we've created is we have here a function That function, it gets all the parameters that we would expect. And then if everything completed and it completed well, then it's going to send us that object as an object, so we don't have to actually create the object. All right, I returned to you from the future just for a second here because I forgot to actually do the one last and really critical thing, which is to actually issue the whole command, which is our aj.send. We're basically instantiating after we've done everything and we're sending it out. So with that said, that is our Ajax part itself. Now it's time for us to actually implement it. So I'm going to go into our actions. And in our actions itself, this is exactly where I'm going to actually start this up. So first of all, I'm going to import our Ajax, and I'm going to import it from utils / Ajax. Yep, that was the name. And now that I've loaded it up, it's time for me to call our Ajax call and literally trigger our server call. So I'm going to go ahead here and call Ajax. And I'm going to basically send here an object. And for our object itself, I'm going to send a URL. And that URL is going to be addTask, which we'll create in a minute on the server. Our method is going to be a post. And because our default is post, we don't have to write it. Our data itself is going to be our packet. And our success hook is going to be a callback. That I'm just going to turn it into an arrow method, arrow function more accurately, and it's going to have only one thing that it accepts. It's going to be accepting a task in our situation, and when our task is received, then I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to call the addTask. So addTask sync, and I'm going to call that task. So I'm literally sending over to our addTask a complete task. Okay, so that is what I'm doing really on the client side. I don't have to change anything in my React element, and notice how powerful this was. Now that we're working with data, I don't even need to go back to the component anymore. I'm literally just working within our action area because I wanted to change the action to change what the action actually does. So let's go ahead and save. It's not ready yet. It's not completely working yet because the next step is we need to tie it in with what's happening on the server itself, which we'll do in the next lecture. So in this lecture, we saw how we could separate and create an asynchronous call in our actions, but